Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan says he is opposed to Finland and Sweden joining NATO. Turkey is a NATO member, and all NATO countries must unanimously approve a country becoming a new member. Marcin Przydacz is the Deputy Foreign Minister of Poland. Welcome to the program.
Hello, good afternoon. Good to have you.
I want to start by talking about NATO. Now, we're on the cusp of seeing NATO grow, Finland, perhaps Sweden, and I'm curious what we should think, what you think about the prospect that Vladimir Putin might retaliate, because we know this is exactly what he didn't want.
Of course, he didn't want to expand NATO, but that's from our perspective, the positive outcome of this situation. I'd love to see also one day Ukraine and other countries, and especially Ukraine, which is giving a kind of prize for such a situation now, to join the EU and maybe perhaps also NATO. But with regard to the possible reaction of Mr. Putin, as we all know, there are not that many success. I mean, we can hardly see any success already on the Ukrainian front line. So there is very unlikely for Mr. Putin to react in terms of military aggression to any other country now. But of course, he has other instruments through the disinformation channels, through the cyber attacks, gas supplies. As you know, he's already cut off gas supplies to Poland. He can blackmail other countries with this. That's why we should perceive Russia and the Kremlin regime as a very unpredictable, unstable partner, and find another partners with regard to the energy security of Europe. But when it comes to Sweden and Finland, Poland is very much in favor of them joining NATO. We just believe that it's just the beginning of a very nice story, very nice cooperation. Mm-hmm. There will be a lot of added value of that fact.
Okay, I hear what you're saying. Today, though, we have Turkey calling into question the possibility that Finland would join. Do you think that could actually end up being a barrier?
Well, NATO works on a consensus, so we need to have all every single ally to agree on that. I surely believe that we will find a joint position of every ally. But let me repeat: it is now Finland and Sweden, but Poland is in favor of open door policy. There are other countries waiting in a queue and really doing great job in order to defend the security of Europe, and proving, like Ukraine, that would be a great ally.
Well, so let's talk about Ukraine and its role, or I guess lack thereof, in NATO right now. You have Ukrainian President Zelensky's chief of staff saying that while it's logical for Finland to join NATO, it shows that the country is getting, quote, special treatment, and it exposes the, quote, double standard in the alliance. Ukraine, obviously, unhappy that it is not being brought into the fold in NATO. What do you say to that?
Well, to be honest, I can somehow understand that position of Ukraine. And I just said a couple of seconds before, it is Ukraine which is paying a huge price right now and really defending the stability and security of the eastern flank of NATO. We've been in Poland advocating for Ukraine to join NATO since we are the member of NATO, but it takes time, of course, to convince other partners. Well, if there is a consensus for Sweden and Finland to join, we should, and it's a legitimate question, we should ask why not Ukraine and when Ukraine. I'm not saying that it may happen overnight, but at least we should give them the scenario what to do in order to join both EU and NATO, and this perspective should be open for them.
Well, I want to stay there for a moment. Obviously, were Ukraine to join NATO right now, and as you say, it requires all the countries of NATO to be on side, and we certainly don't seem to be there right now, but it would risk provoking Putin further. So what would you say to representatives in Canada, for instance, about why this would be a good choice and not one that would in fact make the situation worse?
Provoking Putin to do what? He has already invaded the sovereign country of Ukraine. It's not about, Putin doesn't need any...
further use of chemical weapons. I mean, obviously he has access to nuclear weapons.
Any our decision to be provoked. He, in his statements, has been undermining the legitimate rights to Ukraine to exist. So it's not about provoking Mr. Putin. Putin. They are doing what they actually want, and the only thing that may stop them is the unity of transatlantic community and our proper reaction. If we'll if we'll show that we are weak, that we are stepping back with regard to Ukraine, for example, not answering to their request of being a member of the Euro-Atlantic community, that would be the signal of being weakness, of being weak for Mr. Putin, and he could, of course, go forward. So my answer to the Canadian people would be, let's not be afraid. Let me repeat what Joe Biden just said in Warsaw a couple of weeks ago. Let's not be afraid. Ukraine has the right to exist. It is a country which is fighting for the values which are very important for all of us, for the democratic system, for market economy, for all these individual rights which are very much important for them. This is also a war between the democratic country and authoritarian, aggressive regime. Let's stand with Ukraine because they are on the right side.
And on that note, we know that there's this upcoming NATO meeting. Canada's Prime Minister will be attending. I believe you have said it's the time for decision-making, that you expect something concrete is going to come out of this. What might that look like? What would you like to see?
Well, there are several NATO meetings coming. Even this week there is a meeting in Berlin. Then we have a NATO summit in Madrid. What we are expecting from this summit is to take several important decisions. First, to adapt NATO to the current situation. We have a war on our borders, basically in the proximity of eastern flank of NATO. We need to adapt to that by adoption of the strategic concept, the strategy for that, with regard, of course, to the aggressive posture of Russia, but also with the other possible threats which may appear in Arctic, for example, up to the north, and in the south with the possible crisis to the south of Europe. So I'd love to see NATO be prepared for such a situation. The first thing. The second, of course, to adapt NATO posture on the eastern flank of NATO. It is Poland, Baltic states, and other Eastern Central European countries which are risking a lot right now, also through providing assistance to Ukraine. So more unity is needed, and more NATO presence, permanent presence in this region would be a proper signal, political message towards Mr. Putin. Don't even try to check our unity, our reaction. We are ready to defend by deterrence right now, but we are very much united, much more united than ever in history.
And obviously, you would welcome if some of that presence came from Canada.
Of course, I mean, Canada is already, Canadian soldiers are already present in Poland. You are the country which is very important in this EFP base, NATO base in Latvia. So every country is paying its share. Would love to see Canadian soldiers, also American soldiers, British soldiers are already on a Polish arm. More soldiers and more equipment without provoking, just deterring Mr. Putin, and as I said, sending him proper strategic message. Don't even try.
Okay, we're going to have to leave the conversation there. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.